when Trump is found guilty of extortion through his tariff wars only to launder foreign company money into his cryptos of his World Liberty Company, those sovereign nations that were inflicted with tariffs would seek reparations and sanctions to be paid by Trump to those nations, even if Trump has to stand trial and be extradited to those foreign nations to stand trial as a corrupt businessman. Those nations will hold Trump accountable for reparations, whether it be Canada, whether it be Germany, whether it be France, whether it be the House of Saudi Arabia, whether it be Japan, whether it be Taiwan, whether it be South Korea, whether it be Mexico. If there's extortion rackets with Trump imposing tariffs globally or anywhere in the global south, Trump said 100% tariff for the global south. So if we find any corruption of Trump extorting foreign governments and foreign companies to launder kickbacks into his crypto company, those sovereign nations would impose tariffs. Excuse me. They would impose from his tariffs, they would impose reparations in criminal trial hearings, where Trump will be extradited to these nations to stand trial. And as far as him pardoning himself federally, this is not an official act that you can pardon yourself from the federal courts or the Supreme Court justices. And the individual states can also hold you accountable for your crypto extortion rackets within their individual states. You tried to overturn an election in 2020 because you was afraid of going to jail with Rex Tillerson and Exxon board members for making fossil fuel deals to enrich yourselves in the first term that you served in the White House. You knew that the FBI was catching up to you, and you tried to overthrow the government. And when you realized it didn't work, you ran scared to Mar-a-Lago with all the evidence that implicated you when you obstructed the Robert Mueller report and redacted all the evidence. And you ran with boxes and boxes like a criminal afraid to be caught. So when you realize that the FBI was catching on to you, Rex Tillerson, Exxon board members, y'all were all scared when your coup d'etat didn't work in 2020 as a business racketeer abusing public office, trying to overthrow the government for your backroom deals with Exxon board members because you're too afraid to face justice. So you thought that you could overthrow the government in 2020. And when you realized it didn't work, you ran scared to Mar-a-Lago with all the intel papers. And now you want to put Kash Patel as director of the FBI and bypass an FBI background check in order to get into the FBI file cabinets and SCIFs and burn any incriminating evidence that implicates your first term in office. So, these are not official acts that the Supreme Court can pardon you. And if you try to pardon yourself, the individual states of the Union can hold you accountable for treason. And not to mention, when you're using your world liberty to extort our allies throughout the world with tariffs in the hopes that you can pressure those businesses and those foreign governments to pay you kickback in order to avoid tariffs on their companies, that means that these nations abroad can ask for your extradition. And when you're found guilty, those sovereign nations will sanction you with reparations. And there's no amount of bond companies that will post bail for you. That's why I'm working with the Secretary General to initiate a policy when it comes to crypto. The only entities that would have the ability to issue crypto will be sovereign nations and their sovereign banks. You can't leave cryptos for individuals to coin their own cryptos because they create Ponzi schemes and pump and dump schemes in Wall Street like this scoundrel Trump this charlatan, this grift of a con artist with his pump and dump schemes. When people buy into his crypto, he will be trying to launder crypto by pumping and dumping into blue chip companies in the hopes that he become a robber baron while his crypto investors are wiped out. So he's extorting nations abroad, our allies, in the hopes that the companies in those nations will pay him kickbacks. That those private companies in those foreign nations will pay him kickbacks through his crypto. He reminds me of Alphonse Capone. You know, he's the type of guy that tells our allied nations, I'll toss a window into your economy. I'll toss a tariff rock into your economical window and shatter your whole government's economy with tariffs if you don't pay me protection rackets to my World Liberty crypto. You want to make sure your country is protected from tariffs. So that's his tactics, tariffing our allies in the hopes that some of those businesses in those nations will pay him crypto kickbacks in order to avoid his tariff sanctioning their companies with tariffs. So Trump is an extortionist. He's an extortionist. And those countries, sovereign countries, can ask for his extradition to stand trial. And if he's found guilty of extortion and extorting sovereign nations in order to pressure their companies to launder money into his cryptos in forms of kickbacks, then those sovereign nations can hold him accountable in their court of laws. And they can seek reparations against him. And like I said, there's no amount of bond companies that will issue bonds to keep his ass out of jail. So I'm working in the United Nations in proposals, submissions to Secretary General Antonio Guterres with personal communiques to make all nations on earth permanent members of the Security Council, that all nations have equal votes as sovereign nations, as permanent members of the Security Council. But also when it comes to world crypto issuing, that belongs with international norms of international based rules that will be set by all nations on earth. So America has to allow all nations to sit down as permanent members, and they all will have equal voting power as sovereign nations. But as far as issuing out crypto globally, that belongs to sovereign right. That is the sovereign right of all nations to issue out their own crypto currencies through their central banks. That doesn't belong in the hands of Ponzi schemers, con artists, grifters, and swindlers. And for that, Trump would stand trial globally. And those sovereign nations will seek reparations. And I don't think he has enough money to pay for those reparations. So I want to bring negotiations within the United Nations to outlaw this type of swindling, trumpery that can run amok on the world stage. There should be no individuals that should have the power to issue their own cryptos, because it leads to corruption, pure corruption, and business racketeering and extortion, as Trump likes to call himself, the great Alphonse Capone, extorting our allies because they'd be ashamed if he tosses a rock into their sovereign nations' economies. So somehow their businesses have to pay protection kickbacks. So for that reason, he should be extradited to these sovereign nations to stand criminal trials for business racketeering. And if he's found guilty of extortion, then he can be sentenced to prison and also fined reparations. And like I said, there's no amount of insurance bond companies that will be willing to post bail.